ממש.
שיש לנו תורה, ובחרת בחיים. איזה זכות יש לנו.
איזה זכות.
בחרת בחיים, הקדוש ברוך הוא נתן לנו חיים ארוכים.
עץ חיים מן המחזיקים בה. ותומכיה מאושר, דרכיה דרכי נועם, וכל נתיבותיה שלום.
זהו. אוקיי.
חזק.
We are holding at the Mishnah on the bottom of Pegim Lamud Bet, מניין לספינה שהיא טהורה. בעזרת השם. Okay, let's go. היום, we're going to learn, בעזרת השם, פ"ד עמוד א', we're going to learn new discussion. בכלל, new discussion. זה גם נוגע לטומאה וטהרה, אבל we'll speak about a boat, ספינה, is not מקבל טומאה. You're going to see there's different sources. A sfina is not mekabel tum'ah. We're going to have to see why. And we'll see different sources, nafkaminas between the sources, and application. And if we have time at the end, we'll also learn about klicheres is not mekabel tumat midras.
We mentioned that, you remember?
I don't remember if we mentioned. We did mention klicheres has special halachot. One of the special halachot, it has many special halachot, klicheres. One of them is also, it's not mekabel tumat midras. To see why exactly, it's based on psukim, Bezat Hashem. עכשיו, before we even start, it's just kedai to do a little bit of a review on these inyanim. We know there's different types of materials, and there's different halachot about being mekabel tum'ah.
Different types of
Let's
material.
say you have, let's just say a number of, you have etz, wood, you have sak, you have beged, you have cheres. There's different halachot about these different types of materials. Different
from tumah.
Of mekabel tumah, of lekabel tumah, exactly. Gam, there's also different types of kabbalat tumah. We have tumat, which is called contact tumah, tumat maga, masa, and midras, right? Different things. Midras is when a zav sits or lies on something, mishkav moshav, and maga is touching, is contact. Fine. Achshav, let's see the Mishnah. This Mishnah is again another minayin. This is actually not really nogea to Mesechet Shabbat, but since the first Mishnah we said
that's how we start the beginning. Minayin
la'avodah zara she'i mekabel. It's tameh. That's nida sheret. The whole inyan. So this is a series of Mishnayot that Rabbi Nasi arranged that are minayin b'mashu, and then later Rashi said we're going to get to a minayin that goes back to Hilchot Shabbat. That's why we're learning these Mishnayot. Minayin l'sfina she'i teora. What is the source that a boat is tehora? Meaning, if a boat, this is maga, we're talking about maga. If a boat touches met, a dead body, let's say, it's not mekabel tum'ah. How do I know? Shene'emar, because the pasuk in Mishlei, Shlomo HaMelech tells us, derech aniyah belev yam. What's derech aniyah belev yam? The way of the ship in the heart of the sea.
Yeah.
Now, kipshuto, if you look at the pasuk there,
it's a very famous pasuk.
It's a very famous pasuk. What's the simple pshat in the pasuk? Shlomo HaMelech is saying things that we can't understand or that we can't know. When a boat goes, it leaves a trail behind it, but as soon as it goes, the trail disappears. So we don't know.
Trail is what is the
derech, meaning the water. It gets choppy and then it slows down. The trail.
The trail.
Trail behind it. But what does it mean? So Shlomo HaMelech is saying kipshuto derech. Aniyah belev yam. So it means the way of the boat in the sea, we don't know. We can't see it after the fact. This is the mikor that a boat is not mikabel tum'ah. So what does that have to do? So let's jump to the Gemara right away. Pshita, the Gemara says, it's obvious aniyah belev yamhu. I mean, what is Shlomo really telling us? Of course, the boat is in the heart of the sea. What is it? What's the pasuk? What's the chidush that Shlomo HaMelech is teaching us? Zakamash Malan, what Shlomo HaMelech is teaching us is Kiyam, Sheha'aniyah is domeh to the Yam. Ma Yam Tal, Yam is water. Water is like Mechubal HaKarka, it's connected to the ground. Ground is not Mekabel Tum'ah. Af Sfina Teorah. So what Shlomo HaMelech is teaching us, and I'm going to speak this out, how the Rishonim speak this out. Be'etzem, this is Halacha LaMoshe Misinai. Because really, you can't learn out a new halacha from Nevi'im and Ketuvim. So what's the pshat? Halacha l'Moshe Sinai is that a boat is not mikabel tum'ah.
Boat, זה הלכה בשם סיני.
Boat, בספינה, is that ספינה is not mikabel tum'ah. בא שלמה המלך במשלי, והוא רצה ליתן רמז לזה. אז מה היה הרמז? זה דומה קצת לאסמכתא, אבל בעצם הלכה למשה מסיני, זה דאורייתא. This is Deoraita. It's Halacha Moshe Sinai. He gave a remez, a hint to it in Mishlei. He wrote, Aniya, Derech Aniya Belev Yam. What does he want to teach us? Is this is something we don't really understand the reason for. Be'etzim, it should be Mekabel Tum'ah. So that's how we're reading a little deeper pshat in the pasuk. Shlomo knew this before, which was halacha Moshe Sinai, that a sfina is not mekabel tum'ah. Who some remez betoch mishlei that the aniyah is like the yam, and I don't understand the reason because that's halacha Moshe Sinai that we don't understand the reason for. So that's the first mekor that a sfina is not mekabel tum'ah. Again, it's really be'etzem halacha Moshe Sinai, which means it's deoraita. He gave a remez in Mishlei. Beautiful. Tanya. Now Chananya says in the Braita a second mekor for this halacha. A second source that a boat is not mekabel tum'ah. Again, I just want to explain that because be'etzem, a boat, usually boats were made out of etz. Etz is mekabel tum'ah. So that's what Shlomo HaMelech was saying. Etz, wood.
The kli, that's what we
it's a kli, so it's mekabel tum'ah. So that's why what Shlomo HaMelech was saying was, this is, I don't understand it, but that's the halacha. Okay.
Fair.
Now Chananya Omer, Tani, the Braita says, Chananya Omer, a second mikor. And we're going to see that there's a nafkamina between the mikorot. Two nafkaminas, actually, we'll see. So what's the mikor? The psukim tell us, when it talks about tuma v'tahara, legabe different materials. So what does it say there? Nilmeda misak. As ma omer pasuk. The pasuk says as follows. It says, "V'chol asher yipol alav mehem." You see, it talks about when I'm at a dead body. V'chol asher yipol alav mehem. Slicha, is that a dead body or is that sheretz?
שרץ ספינה ככלי עץ, וכלי עץ הוא קש לשק אין טומאה. שנאמר לגבי טומאת שרץ, וכל השיפול...
שרץ, okay, ברוך השם, שרץ. What does it say there by טומאת שרץ? וכל asher, I'm reading the full pasuk. וכל asher yipol alav mehem b'motam, itma. So it gives tum'ah if something of the dead sheretz falls onto these materials, mikol kli etz, or beged, or or, or sak. Kol kli asher yasem melacha behem b'mayim yuva, v'tamei ha'erev v'taher. If it becomes tamei, you put it in the mikveh and it's tahor. Fine. But what are the four materials the pasuk says? Etz, wood, beged, material, or is leather, or sak. What's sak? Sackcloth. Now, sak is something that is what we're going to call it is metaltel malev rekam. Maze metaltel malev rekam. It means that it's a material that was used to move when it was empty and also when it was full. They used to use sak as bags to hold things in. It's like heavy-duty bags. As what was the nature of sak? The nature is it's metaltel male verekam. Is that it's moved when it's empty, maleh when it's full, vegam when it's empty. So what Chananya is going to say is, it puts sak together with these three other materials. One of them is etz. Boats are made out of etz usually. So what we learn from that is, in order for etz to be mekabel tum'ah, it has to be like sak. That it's metaltel, maleh v'rekam. It has to be that it's moved when it's full, and also when it's empty.
For example.
So the thing is like this. If you have a box that's made out of wood, it's a kli, it's mekabel tum'ah, it has a beit kibul, that's what's necessary. And also it's metaltel maleh v'rekam. Actually, there's 2 points. Actually, one is that it has to have beit kibul, and the other is that it has to metaltel maleh v'rekam. That box will be mekabel tum'ah, because it's domeh l'sak. Levanta?
Like a treasure box.
If you have such a large piece, a box of wood, we learned about this before, that you cannot move it when it's full. What's going to happen if you move when it's full? It's going to break. It's not going to work.
Right.
So then it's not going to be
Mekabel
tum'ah. That's the limud from sak to etz. Achshav says Chananya, why are boats not mekabel tum'ah? Ken, it's like a kli made out of etz. The problem is, when a boat is full, it's not metaltel mal. You can't move it. Tosfot points out, by the way, it moves in the water. It's the water moving it. But be'etzem, it's not something that could be moved. Metaltel maleh v'rekam. So Memela, Chananya says, the limud that boats are not mekabel tumah, it's wood, it's a kli, The answer is, yeah, but it's not metaltel malev rekan. And in order for kli etz to be mekabel tumah, it has to be a beit kibul. Okay, so a boat, let's say, has that. But it also has to be metaltel malev rekan like sak. This is not because it's too big, and that's not going to be mekabel tumat maga. Let's see that inside. Says Chananya. Tanya Chananya Omer nilmeda misak. We learn it out from that pasuk by Sheretz, where it compares sak and etz. Ma sak metaltel malev rekan. Af kol metaltel malev rekan. So to anything that is movable when it's full or when it's empty. La'afuke sfina, which excludes a boat, de'ena metaltelet malev rekan. You can't move it when it's full or when it's empty because it can't be moved naturally on the land. So memela, that's why boats are going to be excluded. They're not included. They're excluded from the parasha of Kabbalat Tumat Maga. Shav yesh lanu two sources. What are the two sources? יש לנו מקור אחד שאמרנו שזה הלכה למשה מסיני ושלמה המלך רמז לזה. He hinted to this in Mishle. Okay. He said that the boat is like the yam.
I didn't understand.
למה? אבל זה הלכה למשה מסיני, אבל זה הספינה דומה לים שזה לא מקבל טומאה. והמקור השני זה חנניה, זה המקור של המשנה, של התנא שלנו. Okay. המקור של חנניה זה עוד תנא. מה הוא אומר? המקור הוא that we learn out that in order for כלי עץ to be מקבל טומאה, it has to be דומה לכלי שק.
Again?
כדי שכלי עץ יקבל טומאה.
דומה לשק. מה שק? מטולטל מלא, מטולטל ריקם, כך צריך להיות גם הכלי הזה. אבל אם זה כלי שאני לא יכול להזיז אותו שום מלא, הרי הוא יישבר, כמו שהסברנו את הקופסה, כמובן הוא נהיה במצב הזה.
זה אינו מקבל
טומאה.
עכשיו, מה הנפקא מינס between these two פשטים? תחשוב על זה for a second. If you think about it, what would be the nafka mina if the source is הדמיון בין הים והצפינה, או עם הדמיון שזה לא מטלטל מלא וריקן? It's two nafka minas. The Gemara wants to explain what would be the nafka mina אם אתה לומד כמו התנא שלנו, או אם אתה מביא מקור משק, כמו חנניה. There's two nafkaminas we're going to say now. There's actually two cases where they would argue. Ba'etzem, they both agree by the sfina, it's not mekabel tum'ah. By a regular wood boat, it's not mekabel tum'ah. So what's the nafkaminas then?
nafkaminas אם אני לומד את זה כמו שהמשנה אמרה, או כמו רבי חנניה.
זה לא נפקמינה.
לא, מה הנפקמינה, איך אני לומד את זה? תשאל את זה שוב פעם.
השאלה היא, למעשה, practically speaking, both of them hold the boat in our Mishnah is not mekabel tum'ah. The wood boat in the Mishnah זה לא מקבל טומאה. או בגלל שזה דומה לים, או בגלל שזה דומה לשק, שזה לא דומה לשק. זה לא מטלטלת מלא וריקן. However you learn. So what's the difference between these two opinions? We have two מקורות, there's a nafkamina. צריך להיות איזה nafkamina. So there must be a case where they're going to argue. What would be the case that they would argue? So let's see. Mai benayu, what's the case that they would argue? Ika benayu, the first nafkamina is sfina shel cheres. Now, why is sfina shel cheres unique? Lama is different. It says like this. Let's speak it outside for a second. According to the Tana of our Mishnah, אין ספינה בעולם שמתקבל טומאה. למה?
לא משנה, כי זה הים. כי בגלל שהיא בים, כל מה שהלימוד, ובתוך זה ספינה כים. אז זה לא משנה איזה חומר הספינה עשויה. אבל לכל רבי חנינא זה כן.
למה זה מקבל טומאה לפי חנניה?
כי כל מה שהוא התיר אותה, הוא למד מתך שק. ושק דומה לעץ. אבל פה זה לא איזה חרס.
חרס is not in the pasuk of שק. So therefore, פה אתה צריך הגדר של מטלטל מלא וריקן כדי לקבל טומאה, רק בדברים שאין בתוך הפסוק, אבל חרס זה לא בתוך הפסוק. אז חרס, אף שזה לא מטלטלת מלא וריקן, זה כן מקבל טומאה.
כי זה לא בפסוק, לא מוזכר בפסוק.
בדיוק, let's see that inside. עיקר בעיניי ספינה של חרס, מה דאמר אינה בלב ים, לפי התנא שלנו שזה לא בלב ים, אונייה בלב ים, הנמי בלב ימי. It's also a boat בלב ים, it's not מקבל טומאה. According to Chananya, kisak, the reason that the boat is not mikabel tumah is because it's like sak, and therefore it's not mitaltelet malei v'rekan, so it's not mikabel tumah. But hanach cheres, hanach etz ve'or, those that are in the pasuk, nechti v'gabei sak, de'i mitaltelet malei v'rekan in ilo lo. So they need it to be mitaltelet malei v'rekan kedei lekabel tumah. Aval sfina shel cheres, it's not in the pasuk. So legabe sfina shel cheres, af al gav de'ena mitaltelet malei v'rekan, it would still be mikabel tumah. Nafkamina number one.
חזק.
Okay, so nafkamina number one is the case would be a boat of cheres. According to Tana of our Mishnah, it doesn't make a difference. A boat is like the yam; it's not mekabel tumah. But according to Chananya, we say that's not in the pasuk. It does not need to be metaltalat malev rekan.
And does
kedei
mekabel
lekabel
tumah. Does.
Beautiful. Nafkamina number two. Inami sfinat Yarden. Yarden was smaller than the big ocean. So the boats they used in the Yarden were smaller. And as we're going to see, these types of boats were able to be moved even on the dry land. They were able to be moved.
On a dry land?
Even on the dry land, they were able to be moved.
What do you mean dry land?
Al achof.
How come?
Because they were smaller boats. In the Yarden, the Yarden is smaller than a big ocean or a big sea.
Yeah.
So therefore, the boats that they used in the Yarden were much smaller. Those types of boats were able to be metaltelet malev rekan. They could be moved. So what's Hanani going to say?
Could be moved on the real.
Even on the ground, they could be moved. We'll get to exactly how.
It's a very small one.
They were small boats.
Yeah.
So those types of boats, according to Hananya, what's going to be the halacha?
Mekabel tuma.
Can mekablim tuma. Regular eitz boats, but they're small. But according to the Tana of our Mishnah, it's a boat. Boats are not mekabel tuma, and therefore they're not mekabel tuma. It's another nafkamina. Let's read that inside. Inam misfinat Yarden, the boats of the Yarden. Leman damar onya betoch yam hi. According to the first shita, hanami onya betoch belev yam hi. It's still considered onya belev yam because that's still a boat, so it's not mekabel tumah. But leman damar mitaltelet malev rekan. According to Hananya, that it's exempt. It's not mekabel tumah because it's not movable. Hanami mitaltelet malev rekan. These are movable, so memela these would be mekabel tumah. Tumat maga. Tov? Let's. Amar Rabbi Chanina ben Akavya, because Rabbi Chanina ben Akavya said, "Mipnei ma'amu sfinat Yarden tmeya." Now Rashi and Tosfot learn Mipnei ma'amu. When you say Mipnei ma'amru, who said? Mipnei ma'amru, who said? You know, he's assuming somebody said this. Sfinat Yarden tmeya. אבל איפה כתוב את זה? אז Rashi says it's based on a Mishnah in Masechet Kelim. Hamefroshim makshim Rashi because there's no mikor, there's no Mishnah like this in Kelim. But Rashi says it and Tosfot seems to say it, so we're going to go with what Rashi and Tosfot say. But Chazal say somewhere that a Sfinat Yarden ze ken mikabel tumah. Ze neged HaMishnah shelanu. Sfina lo mikabelet tumah. אבל יש איזה מקור בחז"ל שספינת הירדן הם כן מקבלים טומאה.
למה לא תקבל טומאה?
אז זה השאלה.
לא, אבל למה אמרנו, למה אתה שואל, חכמי משה, אתה שלא אומר שלא תקבל טומאה?
המשנה שלנו אמר שספינות אינו מקבלים טומאה.
בלב ים.
רגע, אבל יש עוד מקור בחז"ל שספינת הירדן כן מקבלים טומאה. אז השאלה היא למה? מה החילוק בעצם?
כי זה לא ים. זה לא ים, זה לא, אין לדין שהיא לא כולה בים.
Oh, one second, but according to the Tanakama of our Mishnah, it would not be מקבל טומאה, because we don't make that difference. It's also considered a ים, זה גם דומה לים. זה גם דומה לים. רק לחנניה יש חילוק.
איך זה דומה לים? אבל הרבה פעמים אני אגיד לך, בגלל שזה לא עמוק, הבדם נוגע ב...
אני מסכים לך, אני שומע מה אתה אומר, אבל the point is that according to the Tana of our Mishnah, it's not so important if it goes in the Yam or it goes in the Yarden. If it's a boat, it's domet to the water, and the water is not mikabel tum'ah. It's a klal. According to Hananya, it's because it's not movable. But Sfinat Yarden is can movable.
אז מה השאלה?
So says the Gemara, Rabbi Chanina ben Akavya said, Sfinat Yam Tme'ah. Why is it that the Chachamim said, it's a Mishnah in Kelim, that the boats of the Yarden, which are smaller, they are Tme'ah, they are Mikabel Tum'ah, Mipnei she'to'anim ota b'yabasha u'moridin ota l'mayim. They drag it, they load it up on the ground, and they drag it into the water, which means by definition, שזה כן מטלטלת מלא.
מה שאין כן בספינה בלב ים,
הספינות הגדולות,
לא טוענים אותה שהיא בתוך המים.
Exactly.
יפה.
So whose shita does that seem to go? Like Hananya, like we explained, that's within the shita of Hananya. Beautiful, so very nice. Now the Gemara says a very interesting thing. Wow. Who said that last piece? He explained the Mishnah, that what's the reason those small boats are mikabel tumah is because you can drag them on dry land. זה היה Chanina ben Akavya. Chanina ben Akavya.
מה אמר ש...
הוא אמר, למה הספינות הירדן הן כן מקבלים טומאה?
כמו
שאמרו חז"ל, בגלל שאתה יכול...
זה לא כל כך כבד.
כן, זהו, כדרגן. אמר רב יהודה אמר רב, says רב יהודה אמר רב, very beautiful statement. העולם אל ימנע אדם את עצמו מבית המדרש. A person should never withhold from going to the Beit HaMidrash. למה?
Even 1 hour.
ואפילו שעה אחת. Even 1 hour. שהרי כמה שנים נשנית משנה זו בבית המדרש. Because this Mishnah that we just said in Kelim, that the ספינות הירדן are כן מקבלים tuma. We taught it many times, many years in the בית מדרש, ולא נתגלה טעמה עד שבא רבי חנינא בן עקביא ופרשה. Ad that he came to the Beit Midrash and he said, you know why? Because it's dragged on dry land. We learned this Mishnah all the time. We didn't know the reason for it. Wait a second, boats are not mikabel tuma. So what's the difference between this and Sfinat Yarden? Oh, so he came in and he says, I'll tell you what the difference is.
Because you can drag it on the land.
Because you can drag it on the land.
It's small.
Baruch Hashem, he was there because for so many years, and if you don't go into the Beit Midrash, you might miss the opportunity
to
either
know
to reveal it or you might not hear it. And therefore, you should never stay out of the Beit. You should always be in the Beit Midrash. Beautiful thing is it? You should always have to make parnasa. Okay, that's a problem. But anyways, get it. Rabbi Yonatan, let's continue on this note. Rabbi Yonatan says, you should always be in the Beit Midrash. Don't withhold from Beit Midrash. Even when he's going to die, you should be busy learning Torah till the moment of death. The pasuk says, Zota Torah. Now this is a drasha. It's not the simple pshat. The simple pshat is talking about tumat ohel of a dead body. Zota Torah Adam ki Amud ba'ohel. The simple pshat is if there's a dead body, it spreads tumat ohel. The way we say it is Zota Torah Adam ki Amud ba'ohel. Where should he die? Ba'ohel. Why? In the alo shel Torah. Afilu b'shat mita te'osek ba'Torah. Even when you're dying, you should still be involved in Torah ad shat mitato. We're going to bring another drasha in a minute that's more famous. But I saw over here, very nice pshat over here. He says like this. Va'afilu b'shat mita. What is the chidush over here? Pashtut, what does it mean by pashtut? It means the whole life, even when you're on your deathbed, you should still be learning Torah. It's like, he says, she'ochlash kvar koach hayetzer hara. ואין האדם זקוק עוד לתורה שתשמש כתבלין מפני יצר הרע. You know the famous Gemara in Kiddushin. בראתי יצר הרע, בראתי תורה תבלין לו. When a person's old and he's dying, he doesn't have the יצר הרע anymore. So he doesn't need the Torah for that purpose to protect him from יצר הרע. מכל מקום יעסוק בתורה, it's משך חוכמה. He says still he should be involved in Torah. ואף ששעת המיתה היא שעת תשובה ווידוי, אין זה פותר מלעסוק גם בתורה. For sure, he has to be involved in Shuvan Vidui, but it doesn't exempt him. He says, להלכה, חייב אדם ללמוד עד המיטה. איזה.
אתה יודע שהרב יורם, זכר צדיק וקדוש לברכה, שהוא הרגיש באלול שהוא כבר נהיה חולה, ממש, גם בישיבה, והוא הסתלק אחרי, בסך תשרה. הוא ציווה, נתן הוראות מפורשות להכל, ציווה מי ישטוף אותו, הביאו אנשים מירושלים שעשו לו טהרה, מקובלים וזה. הוא ביקש שיביאו אותו, יחזירו אותו איפה שהוא היה, לנתיבות,
כן.
וישימו אותו על השולחן שלו.
He was dead after he passed? על השולחן בבית המדרש?
על השולחן בבית המדרש.
למה? what's the פשט?
זה השולחן שלו, כל החיים שלו על השולחן הזה.
אחר כך הם קבעו אותו.
משם לקחו אותו, הספידו אותו שהוא שוכב על השולחן.
אוקיי. בשעת הספידים.
ואז לקחו אותו, קבעו אותו.
זה המקום שלו.
לא זז. קם בבוקר, 4 בבוקר, יושב על הכיסא הזה, עד 12 בצהריים.
They finished the הספידים, probably. They finished the הספידים.
After finished, אבל הוא שם אותו, את הגופה שלו, על השולחן. על השולחן הזה. שם הוא למד, שם הוא ישב. כן, עטוף. תכריכים. שם, תראה מה זה. לשולחן הזה, כל העם הגיע לשולחן הזה, כל הדיבורים, כל העצות, כל הברכות, הכל, איזה דבר זה. במיטה שלא הביאו אותו לשם.
זה מעניין, בגלל תמיד אנחנו אומרים שהעולם הזה זה temporary, זה ארעי, אבל גם כן צריך לקבוע, אדם צריך לקבוע מקום לעצמו בעולם הזה.
כן.
או שזה מקום קבוע בתפילה, או שזה מקום קבוע בתורה.
כן.
צריך מקום קבוע. אז אף שהעולם הזה זה ארעי, זה temporary. אבל צריך כפיות.
לא בדברים האלה, בדברים האלה צריך קביעות, בוודאי.
כן, צריך כפיות, אבל אפילו בכפיות מקום, זה גם חשוב.
כל הקובע מקומו, אלוהי אברהם בעזרו.
בתפילה, אבל גם בתורה.
בטח.
גם בתורה.
אותו מקום, אותו מקום, אותו זה, איזה שולחן.
אוקיי.
שם אותו על השולחן והספידו אותו על השולחן, משם. מדהים.
Let's go a little bit ahead here. I think we have to stop soon. We have to go. Amar Reish Lakish. Let's finish off the last drasha, more famous drasha. אין דברי תורה מתקיימים אלא במי שממית עצמו עליה. He brings the same pasuk שנאמר, זאת התורה, אדם כי ימות באוהל. מה הפשט? כי ימות באוהל. When is it you're going to be דברי תורה? When is it going to be זאת התורה? ממית עצמו על התורה. Now what does ממית עצמו על התורה? What does it mean? מה הפשט?
מוציא את עצמו מכל התאוות, מאכילה, משתייה, מנשים, מכל התאוות האלה. הוא נותן כל הכוח שלו בתורה, כל ההשקעה שלו, כל המרד שלו בתורה. כמו ממית עצמו על התורה.
כן. So, כפשוטו, I would say, is he puts all his energy into it. הוא נתן כל האנרגיה שלו בתורה.
הכל.
But he says here, שמצער גופו תמיד לשקדת התורה במניעת שינה ותענוגי הזמן. זה רמב"ם, זה לשון הרמב"ם.
כי זה לא הולך ביחד.
מה אתה אומר?
It doesn't work together.
כן,
it's the opposite.
exactly.
כי יכול שיש יותר מותרות, פחות תורה. יותר אכילה, יותר שתייה, יותר שינה, פחות תורה.
אכן, אין דברי תורה, זה לשון אבי.
מתקיימים, אלא במי שמית עצמו לתורה.
מקנים אלא ביישוב הדעת. ועבודת אדם להמית עצמו על התורה, אינה לרומם עצמו מכל דבר מפריעו. ולמצוא יישוב הדעת ומנוחה ללימוד מתוך אהבה ושמחה. It's very... not so simple, but the point is that if you take away all of the ta'avot and all of the avlei azman and all of the shtuyot, and you focus all on learning Torah, so then you have the yeshuv hadat to learn Torah. The difficulty is you have to figure out also how to take care of yourself, because there has to be, and that's why we have whole sugyot in Shas that talk about what's the right thing. Is the Torah in the cheretz, velo in the kol, that's all the questions. But the etzem is to put away everything on the side and only focus all your energy with yeshuv hadat on the Torah. Do you have to go? It's 12.
No, I leave it more.
Okay, בעזרת השם. So let's go a little bit up.
עוד חיים.
היה לנו קצת מוסר היום, ברוך השם. אמר רבא, says רבא. בעצם, just to say a little on that inyan, people, they say, okay, but what is it? I work 10 hours a day and I learn 1 or 2 hours a day. So what is it? I'm not doing it. But it's not true. Because really, the question is, what's your priority? מה החשיבות שלך? מה הקביעות ביום שלך? וקובע מקום לתפילה וגם לתורה וגם לזמן. מה הזמן? What's the important part of your day? But you can't fool yourself. בעצם, באמת, what is the important part of your day? When you close the Gemara after the limud, are you saying, okay, Baruch Hashem, now I'm going to do my real work? Or is the pshat, when am I going to come back to the real life? What's the perspective? הכל תלוי במחשבה של בן אדם. אם בן אדם חושב לעצמו, אני סיימתי הדף היומי שלי, ועכשיו אני הולך
לביץ'.
לא לביץ' איבן, אני הולך לביזנס. אבל זה החיים שלי, למה אני הולך?
חזק.
זה חסר. אבל אם הוא חושב, אני סוגר את הגמרא עכשיו, unfortunately, בעזרת השם, I'm going to come back soon, and back to what's really important in life, because I have to go do other things in the meantime. It's all a matter of perspective.
בדיוק.
It's such a
very important.
And you see the difference in people too. You see the difference. The guy, everyone feels a chiyuv after the, kovea itim. Or is it, that's really where the life is? That's the question. You could see that, and it changes the whole person's day if you really think like that.
Very big point.
Yeah.
Very חשוב point.
Right there.
אמר רבא.
אמר רבא, says רבא, ולחנניה, עכשיו אני רוצה להסביר את זה בחוץ, then we'll see it inside. When Hananya said, in order for a ספינה לקבל טומאה, כן? כדי לקבל טומאה, זה צריך להיות מטלטלת מלא וריקן. It has to be movable, okay? Movable by who? מה חשבת?
Me.
By a person. No. says רבא, אפילו if it's only movable by שברים, by oxen, it's also considered movable. Meaning, it has to be movable, but even if it's very heavy and you can't move it, but oxen could move it, זה גם נקרא מטלטלת מלא וריקן, וזה גם מקבל את תומה. How do I know? Let's see. אמר רבא says רבא, ולחנניה, Tiltul al yedei shvarim shmei tiltul. Even if it's only movable by shvarim, it's still considered tiltul and it's mikabelet tum'ah. So even if it's very large and very heavy, but the item could be moved or the boat could be moved through these oxen, זה גם נקרא מטלטלת מלא וריקן וזה גם מקבלת טומאה. How do we know this? Titnan. So this is based on actually two Mishnayot we're going to learn and a main Rav Rabbi Yochanan. Mishnah and Kelim. The first Mishnah says like this. Okay, before we see this, I just want to explain the Yesodot here. What does an item need? Let's speak about etz, wood. Ken? איך etz מקבל טומאה? דבר של עץ. ראשון has to have כלי קיבול. And number two, like we said, מטלטלת מלא וריקן. אז עכשיו יש לנו עגלות. עגלות אומרים?
עגלות.
Wagons, עגלות. Okay. יש לנו wagons. 3 types of wagons. And now we're going to talk about 2 types of tum'ah. We're going to talk about midas, and we're going to talk about maga. Now, to get to mekabel tumat maga, again, it has to be beit kibul. It has a place to hold something. V'gam, it has to be metaltelet malev reikan. But in order to be mekabel tumat midras, you need something else. What do you need?
שראוי.
Exactly. Is that it's normal to sit or to ride on this thing.
כמו כרכרה.
Now, I want to explain just there's 2 ways that it would not be ra'oi. Either bichlal, people don't sit on this thing. That's just not the normal usage of this thing. But if it is the normal use, it would be mekabel tumat midras. Or even if it is not the normal use for this thing, but it's not mafriya, the use of it in its normal way, it could still be mekabel tumat midras.
Again.
It's mekabel tumat midras if either it's normally sat on, dainu it's a normal thing to sit on, to lay on, etc. Or even if it's not usually used for that, but people could, and it wouldn't take away from the other use, the normal use of that item.
For example.
We'll see a few examples now. We're going to get to that more by the chest, but the bottom line is that either it has to be usually used for sitting or lying, or even if it's not usually used for sitting or lying, but you could sit or lie on it and it wouldn't take away from the normal tashmish of that item. We'll discuss more that idea. Let's see. So Ditnan, again, Rav is going to prove that even if it's very heavy and only shvarim could move it, it's still considered
Rabbi going to
movable.
prove even if it's very heavy, but shvarim can move it.
That's זה גם נקרא.
Consider שאפשר להזיז את זה.
Exact, and that's considered מקבל טומאה.
Which was a chidush because I thought it's only by human beings.
Exactly. That's a chidush. Ditnan, Mishnah Kelim says like this. Shalosh agalot hen. There are 3 types of wagons, and they have different halachot for tum'ah. Number 1, asuya kikatedra. One that's made like a chair. Okay? So they had wagons that had a place to sit. It was actually a chair. Now, what was it used for? A person would sit on it. עכשיו, יש לנו בית קיבול. יש לנו מקום לשבת, אז מה אתה אומר? So, טמאה מדרס, פשוט. זה מתאמץ, מקבל את טומאת מדרס, למה? Because a person could sit on it. So it's פשוט. That's meant for sitting. You sit on it, פשוט, מקבל את טומאה.
And you can move it.
What's that?
Can move
and you can move it. Okay, right. You can move it, and it's mikabel tuma midras.
Midras.
But kimita, what if it's a wagon that's made like a bed? Now, Rashi explains, what does it mean it's made like a bed? It means it was a wagon that was, it sounds like it was long, and it had a place, like a piece of leather, stretched out like a bed, but it wasn't meant for people to sit on. What was it actually made for? It was made to hold pragmatya. It was made to hold merchandise. That's what it was actually made for. But let's stop for a second. That means, let's think about this for a second. Is it ra'oi yeshiva? It's made to hold merchandise, but etzim, that's the purpose of this thing.
But still, you can learn.
You could sit on it, but what would happen if you sit on it?
You're wasting the use of it.
Exactly. You're taking away. That's what I was saying before. You're taking. What's somebody going to say to you? Amud v'naseh ba melachtenu. Remember we said that expression. So what does that make this then? You can't be mekabel tumat midras. Why? Because even though you could theoretically sit on it, that's not what it's meant for. But taking the. And if somebody sits on it, it will take away from the usage that it's meant for. That's not going to be mekabel tumat midras, but it does have a beit kibul. As I can mekabel tumat maga, normal maga, because it is a kli. So tme'at tameh met. It is mekabel regular tumat met. Rashi says tumat met is just an example. בעצם what it means is, any tumat maga, any contact tum'ah, it's just not mikabel tumat midras. That's the point. The third type of wagon is shel avanim. Now, shel avanim, Rashi explained, it was a wagon. At the bottom of it, it was meant to hold big stones. Zaya, point of this wagon. The bottom of it, it had like a lattice work. You know, lattice. It had lattice is like some people put for the walls of their sukkah. It's like woven. I don't know how to say it in Hebrew, but lattice. It's called in English. Zekmo, like it's like wood, but there's holes in the wood throughout.
Yeah.
They used to use this for moving boulders, okay, large rocks. עכשיו, this thing, a wagon, that the Beit Kibul, the place where it was able to held large rocks, but there were holes in it because it was this type of woven wood.
Yeah.
The holes were larger than the size of a rimon. Why is that important?
Mention that.
Because if it's larger than the size of rimon, it's not mikabel tuma. It loses its chashivut of a Beit Kibul, and therefore it's not mikabel tuma. Now this is not only not mikabel tumat midras because sitting on it would take away from its intended purpose, but it's also not mikabel stam tumat magav tumat net because
the hole is too big.
Because the holes are too big.
And losing the status of kli.
Exactly. Let's read that inside.
tumat maga.
So that's not mikabel tuma
At all.
En tuma bazeh. Ken. Let's read that inside. Shel avanim, the wagons that were used to hold stones, teora miklum. It's tahor from everything. There's no tuma in this at all. Now, Rabbi Yochanan here is really the raya that Rava wants to bring. Comes
Rabbi Yochanan it's really the raya. Rabbi Yochanan it's really the raya.
כל זה היה משנה ממסכת כלים. אבל עכשיו, רב רוצה להביא ראיה ממה שאומר רבי יוחנן. ותשמע.
רב רוצה להביא ראיה.
בא רבי יוחנן, let's read his word and then explain. ואמר רבי יוחנן says like this, ואם יש בה בית קיבור רימונים, if the holes at the bottom of that עגלה של אבנים
can hold רימון.
could hold רימונים, טמאה טממת. So then it is מקבל טומאת מגע. Why? Because it has Beit Kibul, so it's a kli, it's mikabel tum'ah. Now stop for a second. What's the chidush Rabbi Yochanan's teaching us? So listen to how Rashi speaks this out. אני הייתי יכול להגיד, למה הוואגנס של אבנים לא מקבלים טומאה? מה הפשט במשנה? הייתי יכול להגיד, בגלל העגלות האלו הם מאוד מאוד כבדים. They're very heavy.
Oh, it's stone.
And I can't move them. Who could move them? השברים יכולים לזוז אותם. אני לא יכול. So הייתי יכול להגיד, since I couldn't move it, that's why they're not מקבלים טומאה. It doesn't have to do with the holes being too large or too small. It's because I can't move them. אז בא רבי יוחנן להגיד, לא. The weight is not the problem. Because since shvarim could move them, that could be מקבל טומאה. זה כן נקראת מטלטלת מלא וריקן. אז למה הם לא מקבלים טומאה? The only reason is because the holes are too big, it doesn't hold a rimon. And that's what he's saying. But if it could hold a rimon, it is מקבל טומאה. That's what Rava's bringing. Rava just brought a proof. You see from here, even though they're too heavy, that you cannot move them yourself. But shvarim could move them. They would be מקבל טומאה because that's considered מטלטלת מלא וריקן. How do we know? Because Rabbi Yochanan is saying the whole problem with agalot shel avanim is that the holes are too big. But it's not a problem they're too heavy for me to move. Because that wouldn't be an issue, because that would still be considered metaltelet malevrekan if oxen could move them. Now the Mishnah, the Gemara brings another support to this proof. And it's based on another Mishnah in Mesechet Kelim. The Mishnah there says the following. Let's read through it. It's talking about tevot. Tevot are chests. Place that you store things. Like a chest of drawers, where you store things. So the Mishnah in Kelim says, Shalosh tevot hen. This is a support to the proof. We'll see. Shalosh tevot hen. There are three types of chests. Also, legabe lekabel tum'ah. The first one is teva shepitcha mitzida. You have a chest of drawers, but it opens on the side. It opens on the side. Now tachshov al zeh for a second. Usually, you don't lie down on a teva. It's not a normal place for lying down. Aval, אם הפתח לפתוח את זה בצד, אז אתה יכול לפתוח את זה בצד ולהכניס דבר או להוציא דברים ממנו, אפילו אם יש מישהו יושבת או יושנת על top of it.
The fact that somebody sit on it, it doesn't take off the use of this kli.
ממילא,
still I can use
what's
it.
that going to tell us about this teva?
שמקבל טומאה.
אפילו טומאת מדרס. למה? Because...
לא לקחתי את ה-useful of that.
Beautiful, exactly. זה אותו רעיון that we spoke at before. So again, let's read that inside. The first of the three tevot
לא בנגתנו
is...
יקום עשה את מלאכתך.
We're not going to say that. We don't need to. Exactly. Again,
משהו כמו זה נהנה וזה אינו חסר. בערך משהו.
אבל זה בנוגע הלכות ממונות, זה בנוגע הלכות תומה וטהרה. תיבה שפיתחה מצידה טמא המדרס. Why? Because the person can lie on top of it and it doesn't take away from the use. מלמעלה, but if the opening is on top, so now the problem is, if somebody's lying on top of it, I can't open it to take something out or to put something in. So it's not mekabel tumat midras, but meyat tamemet. Why? Because this is a type of thing that still has a beit kibul, and memela that's going to be mekabel tumat magav tumat met. But says the Mishnah, v'haba'a b'midah. Literally it means if something comes in measure. But Rashi learns it means a very heavy teva. That it's so heavy you can't move it. Malev reikan tehora miklum. So then it's completely tehora. Now, why is it tehora if it's very heavy? Why is it tehora? Why is it tehora? Because that's not considered metaltelet malev reikan. By the way, I saw some say over here, even if oxen could move it, the problem is when they move this type of thing, it's gonna break.
That's the problem.
So the raya we're bringing from here is like this. In that second Mishnah in Kelim, what you see is, by the tevot, if it's too heavy, it's not mekabel tum'ah. Why is it not mekabel? Because even if the oxen can move it, it's going to break, so it's not metaltel malev reikan. לא אמרנו החילוק הזה לגבי העגלות. למה לא אמרנו את זה? Because that could move. ממילא, since it could move על ידי the oxen, even if it's very heavy, it's still מקבל.
זה לא יישבר.
So says Rava, you see from here that when it comes to, what's the gather of moving? Gather of moving is not what I could move.
The ox, but without to break it.
Without to break it,
that's
exactly. You want to go a little ahead or stop here?
I'm gonna go now.
Stop here?
Yeah.
Okay, we'll stop here.
We learn what? 35 minutes? 37 minutes?
41.
בסדר, ברוך השם. ודיברנו דברי תורה עוד 10 דקות.
דיברנו, בעזרת השם, towards the top of the page. צעקו ברוך.
שפוך אותך.
יוחאי.